There's been a multi-pronged approach from the right, Lewis, in fighting against social programs, welfare benefits, and so many other things that every other country at the same level of development that the U.S. has and considers part of their society. There's been the argument that it is not the responsibility of the government to provide things for the poor or to those who are in need. There's the argument that the recipients don't deserve those benefits. There's the argument that too many recipients abuse the system. There's those who argue that it is just too expensive to have social welfare programs. And then there are those who argue that it actually hurts those who are paying in to these benefits but not receiving any of them. I want to focus today on the expense one, that welfare programs are just too expensive. The Washington Post has an article which is debunking the recent talking point from the right that that $1 trillion a year are being spent on welfare and that the spending doesn't reduce poverty at all. This has been circulating on conservative media, on Fox News. As the Washington Post writes, you'll probably see the following line added to the $1 trillion claim. It's true. According to a recent report, we spend $1 trillion on means test programs each year, yet the official census numbers show no reduction in poverty. Now, if you read that second line, you might say, oh, that line supports the we spend $1 trillion on poverty and we don't help anybody get out of poverty. It actually weakens it, Lewis, because where the trillion number is coming from is by wrapping in a whole bunch of stuff, including, I can't even tell you all of these things, like, for example, medical benefits that are part of Medicaid, for example. Those are being included as part of the war against poverty welfare that isn't having any effect on poverty. All sorts of programs that aren't really what is being spent on poverty are being wrapped into that. So let's look at what is actually being spent, Lewis. If you look at what is actually being spent on fighting poverty directly, welfare to fight poverty, we have $55 billion spent on the earned income tax credit, $21 billion on temporary assistance for needy families, $43 billion for SSI, Social Security, $75 billion on food stamps, $18 billion on housing vouchers and child tax credit. That's a total of $212 billion. Even if we are to include part of the spending on things like Title I grants, Head Start, adoption assistance, which, why are we saying adoption assistance is part of welfare to reduce poverty? Adoption crosses any number, for lack of a better term, of social positions and social classes. Even if we apportion part of that to the war on poverty, we are nowhere close to this bogus $1 trillion number that we're hearing. I'm not at all surprised that the number has been exaggerated.
No, it is really all just a numbers game, and people use different statistics and numbers, and they use it to their advantage. And of course, then we can go on to talk about the stimulative effect of certain provisions of welfare and what percentage of, let's say, that $75 billion used for food stamps, is being put directly back into small businesses.
There's two elements that are missing. One is the one Lewis mentioned, which is think about the positive effect on the economy of the government spending the money on food stamps versus tax cuts for the rich, exponentially more stimulative. But number two, the argument that the earned income tax credit and food stamps, for example, don't lift people out of poverty is bogus, and you just have to think about it. Think critically for a second. If you make $11,489, or did in 2013, which was $1 below the federal poverty line, you are able to receive the earned income tax credit and food stamps. Now, your income will still show as $11,489. You were technically still in poverty, but you are obviously much better off with the earned income tax credit and the food stamps than you would be without it. So we have to think, ladies and gentlemen, just because your taxes don't show that you're out of poverty doesn't mean that the earned income tax credit and food stamps aren't lifting you up. It's just absurd. People just need to think for a second.
Right. It's easy just to shout out these numbers and say we're spending too much, but you have to look at the details.